Look, I opened this jar of rotten baby food, and well, a butterfly came out.
I think probably they all advertise themselves equally. At least they'd better, because the
Hmm.
only way you're going to get noticed in the world is if you're able to promote yourself.
Welcome to the Comedians and Elevators podcast. I've got my guest, Matthew Lindquist. Matthew, say hi, introduce yourself, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right, hi, I'm Matthew Lindquist, like you said. I'm a voiceover artist at current time. I'm actually a retired psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner. So I've done that for ever and a day. And when I retired in 2024, discovered a way to begin working on doing voiceovers, and so that's what I'm trying to do now is get that really voiceover career really up and running.
Awesome, awesome. I love the transition. I got to ask, you've experienced a lot of people that are talking to aliens?
There are some that talk to aliens. I had one in particular I can recall where he was convinced that he was being followed and watched over by an alien, and he told me the name of the alien. And for the sake of the argument, we'll call that alien Scott, because I can't think of what the name was at the time. And I worked with him to try and say, look, there was no alien following you named Scott, and eventually I got through to him, and he said, you're right. Um, there is no alien named Scott following me. He told me his name is Fred. He was only telling me it was Scott in order to keep his identity secret.
Now that's a setup for a joke. So
It is, but
you,
that's reality.
yeah. All right. You ready to get started, Matthew?
Sure.
Listen, to my regular listeners, I know you don't like when at the beginning of these conversations I ask you to subscribe. None of us like it. I don't like saying it. I don't like it being in here. But it's frustrating. You know what else is frustrating? It's also frustrating when I look in the back end of the YouTube channel and I see that 56% of you that watch frequently haven't yet subscribed. And I know this because I see it in the comment section. You say things like, I didn't know I didn't subscribe. And that's actually what fuels the show. Basically, it's like you're making a donation to the show. So that's why I ask all the time, because it enables us to build and build and build, and we're going for the long term here. Hit the subscribe button, and we'll continue to build this show for you. That's my promise. Thank you to all you guys that do subscribe. It means the world to me. All right, so the whole point of the podcast is to compare and contrast the comic versus the comedian. So I define the comic as any person telling funny jokes versus the comedian who's a funny person telling any jokes. So Matthew, would you agree that you start as a comic and evolve into a comedian?
I don't know. I think that you, we often talk in comedy that someone has comic chops,
Mm-hmm.
and then they go on stage and we call them a comedian. So it's difficult to differentiate the two based on exactly what they do and how they present themselves.
Yeah, two sides of the same coin. That's pretty
Yeah,
much how I see it. So whenever you flip it, it's got to land on one side unless we're in the matrix and it could just keep spinning, right?
yeah,
So all right, so you ready for the first question?
sure.
All right, it's about the role of persona in comedy. So, how much of the comedian's voice is a character versus the real self, or versus Scott the alien?
I think that for the most part, any comedian who's on stage, it's going to be a character. They've chosen a persona to present, and so that's the character they act through. Now, obviously, it's based in the reality of who they are, but sometimes people go far afield from that. Um, you just did a last show, I think, where the person you talked to couldn't come up with the name of Lucy. Um, and now I'm drawing a blank on her last name.
Lucille Ball?
No, that's who you said it was probably. No, her name was, see if I wrote it down here. Lucy Darling. She's a
Okay.
comic out of Canada who's also a magician. She uses a different name as a magician, but she's the one who really works the audience. So she puts on a strong persona when she's working the audience. Um, I don't know if she has a persona for magic or not because I haven't watched her magic.
She's also a redhead, right? I researched it
Yes.
after, and then I
Yep.
forgot this has been quite a few episodes ago.
Yeah.
So
I
yeah,
think
so
that's why
then
she called herself Lucy, probably.
Yeah, well, I think she's a natural. Well, I don't know if they both are, but anyway, it's irrelevant. But
Right.
well, all right, very cool. Well, so do you think that disassociation is helpful between these characters from your personal
Um,
experience?
sometimes yes. Sometimes it's really helpful if you can really separate your character from the persona. Sometimes I mean, the comedians who like tell family stories,
Hmm.
talk about their wife or their kids or something like that, they can't separate quite as much, but they do have to be careful that they don't end up insulting the family members too.
Mm, that's right. Well, speaking of insulting, how about punching up versus punching down? So, where do comics versus comedians subscribe to this? And let me put in some historical context. Did a jealous medieval prince become the first comedian by killing the court jester?
Yeah, that would definitely be punching down. Um, I think that probably no, but I can't say for sure since I don't know the particular medieval prince. Um, but you think of a comedian like Joan Rivers, who so many times would basically do her joke, the audience would groan, and she'd make like, "Oh, come on," kind of response to it. So she was punching down and then pulling the audience along with her, and they accepted that. But I think most of us in the world of comedy, which I'm not really in the world of comedy. I have done a little bit um, stand up in the respect that I have married my best friend off to her husband, and I in the officiating process did stand up. um,
Ah,
but
okay.
yeah,
You were the
but
you were the what is it called, of the piece?
yeah, right, yeah, but it's a little bit better to I think to bring the audience up with you rather than to make them come down to where you're at.
Speaking
I
of
know they're big.
princes, wasn't Niccoli Machiavelli a prince as well? I think he
I believe
was.
so. Yeah.
Maybe he's the one I'm
I,
referring to.
maybe. I was going to say, if we think of the guy who played Kramer on Seinfeld, when he lost it on stage because of hecklers and started using the N word over and over again, he really tried to bring the audience down and they wouldn't have anything to
Beady,
do
beady,
with it.
beady.
They just, it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, he
That
became
that was
revolting.
so what happened was that was, from a psychiatric perspective. I mean, that's a break, a split, or is it not?
Yeah. Well, it depends. If he was doing a persona on stage, it was the wrong
Wrong
persona to
choice.
be doing.
Yeah, yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I see stuff like that, I think something has happened
Yeah.
catastrophically. So not
Yeah.
exactly
Me too.
intentional. So
Right.
then is criticizing dead people considered punching down?
That depends on the dead people, I suppose. I mean,
Sure.
if you're, and it's again, criticizing is punching down. Joking about someone's shortcomings is not necessarily criticizing. It's maybe just pointing out a flaw.
Okay.
Not meant to be
So
critical, it's meant to be funny,
right,
right?
right. Yeah. So I wonder, is the nemesis the one? So if it's not criticizing, isn't necessarily punching down, would
Yeah.
probably a higher order level, like the nemesis or the villain, his actions just be purely punching down all the time?
Um, well, I think if I can think of some of the nemesis who certainly attempted to punch down, but it was just instead they just showed their own pathetic nature, and that was
Hmm.
what the humor was. So, and a good example of that is you have to go way back in time to the original Casino Royale that starred David Niven as James Bond and Woody Allen as Jimmy Bond, the evil character in the story who was trying to make a bomb that would eliminate all men over 5'6" because he couldn't ever get women.
This is a real Bond movie?
It preceded every other Bond movie.
Uh,
It's not actually considered part of the franchise,
oh,
but
okay.
yes, it was a James Bond movie, and it was based on the book Casino Royale, which was, the what everyone turns to for a James Bond then as a like a first book kind of thing.
Yeah. All right.
But yeah, if
So,
you haven't seen it, it is one of the best James Bond movies. David Niven stars as a great James Bond coming out of retirement.
Coming out of retirement. He's always coming out of retirement. It's like every
Yeah,
mission's a suicide mission. And he's like, you made it. Well,
yeah,
we want to try again, right?
right.
So then is the audience agreement with the comedian a form of permission or alignment?
I hope it's a form of alignment. You're trying to bring the audience along with you in order to make sure that everything goes the way that it's supposed to. Um, yes, they do in the process of aligning give you permission. Although, again, if I go back to that Michael who played Kramer episode,
Hmm.
the audience did not give him permission, even if they had aligned with him prior to that, right?
Yeah, he definitely took the permission and misaligned at that point.
Yeah,
Such a,
right,
well, being I have been on stage multiple times, and I can say you definitely have an energy level that sometimes is hard to manage,
right.
and I could see that's the choice he went with instead of just getting off stage. But what are you going to do?
Yeah. Most of
So,
most of my
huh?
stage work has been as an actor as opposed to a comedian, although
Right.
I've done a lot of comedies, so it's that too.
It's interesting. Would you say that on stage, performing as an actor, that people may not notice mistakes, but on comedy they do?
Um, it depends on the mistake. I mean, if I go back to a show I did in high school where I missed an entrance, and so they
Well,
started the
yeah.
scene without me, someone else doing my lines, and then I came in when it was an appropriate time that I could pick up and make things go. And now the error there is the person who was on stage then, started the whole scene over again because
Mm,
um, they didn't know how to deal with it. So that
right.
was an error that was probably noticed by the audience. On the other hand, the audience doesn't have a script with them, so they don't know when you make a mistake, um,
Yeah. Unless it's
unless
Shakespeare and then you know
unless it's
it.
Shakespeare, in which when you lose your pentameter, then yeah,
Yeah. Oh, not to mention, yeah.
yeah.
So, cultural translation of comedy. So, how do jokes that work in one country bomb in another?
Well, I think that humor is very cultural. We use different slang, we use different expressions. I mean, um, even some simple everyday kind of things like a water cooler versus a bubbler. We
Mm.
use different terms for things, and so I can tell a joke that, especially if it's one that has a pun as part of the joke, that doesn't translate to a different culture, a different language. Now, within the
Are you
same,
Canadian?
no.
Okay. That's where the bubbler comes from, or is that East Coast? I'm not sure.
I think it's Canada, but I'm not sure. I tried talking to someone from London about it once, and they said, no, we don't call it a bubbler. So I know it's not there. So
Yeah.
I think it may be Canada. Um, yeah.
All
But yeah,
right.
we have those kinds of changes.
We do. So then how does the silence when your joke doesn't land hurt? Physically, emotionally, morally, or spiritually?
Um, I think that it hurts emotionally and spiritually. I think, but the best thing to do, of course, if your joke doesn't land and it's complete silence, is just collapse into a heap on the ground, which then may hurt physically, but the audience at least then has some slapstick to laugh at.
Oh, that's one way to go. Yeah, that's I might consider doing that. We'll see next time. So, so you would say that are comics more universal while comedians are more culturally specific? I guess you're going to flip the coin on this one.
Yeah, no, again, I think that now you say a comic is any person telling a funny joke,
Right,
but if that joke also is culturally specific, then the comic is still culturally specific. Now, if a
right.
comedian tells a joke that is universal, then he's not culturally specific, but most of the time I would say they probably both are culturally specific.
All right. So the so I put it in the context that the comedian's character is the more
Yeah,
universal aspect that audiences would relate to, because
right,
that won't typically change in any venue or country, right? Because you're going to always be
right,
that persona. So,
right. Like I am Roseanne, Rosanna Dana is always Roseanne, Rosanna Dana. Sorry, you have to go
that's
back to the original Saturday Night Live for that one.
right. Speaking of, how about love and justice? So, is the highest function of comedy to expose injustice or to make people feel less alone while living with it?
Um, I don't know that it's necessarily expose injustice, but it is, I think, social commentary many times, um,
Hmm.
at least. Um, I think that good comedians often are a little bit philosophers as well. Although I've watched a lot of comedians that could use to up their philosophy.
Yeah, I mean, good philosophy isn't good comedy necessarily,
No,
right? Because it
no,
needs, you want to find that contradiction, right? I know a lot of people are analyzing Karl Marx these days and finding how he's not even being quoted correctly, but it's still,
right.
it can be very funny, even if it's
Yeah.
wrong.
And of course, with Karl Marx, if you say the same thing 12 times in a row, you've done a good example of Karl Marx. He repeated himself endlessly.
Yeah, if you have kind of a simple direction, you just keep reiterating. It's at least how I interpret it. So
Yeah.
when a joke harms someone unintentionally, does love demand accountability or does justice demand defiance?
I think that love demands accountability. Your idea is not to hurt people with jokes. And that's one of the reasons why we got away from doing so much humor that's based on stereotypes of individual racial groups or whatever, because too often you end up hurting someone in the process. Now, someone like Dave Chappelle can get away, of course, with using the N word, and it's never an issue. But if I were to go on stage and use the N word like Michael did, that's a problem, right? So that
So
demands.
can you pull off the crazy word? Do you have permission, like the C word, crazy, because of
I
your
can use
experience?
crazy because, see, in my personal definition, people that have mental illness are not crazy. Crazy
Okay.
is just a lay term. I use the term mental illness for someone who's having emotional or psychiatric problems that are severe, like the man I mentioned who thought he was being followed by an alien.
But that's what but in a comedy set, would you use that word because you kind of have authority to use it?
I would use that word, but I would use that word in a much more general sense. Somebody did something crazy, someone said something crazy, not that somebody personally is crazy.
Ah, I see. You describe the action, not the person.
Right.
All right. All right. Interesting. So, okay, very important question. Advertising and self-promotion. Who advertises themselves more? The comic, the comedian, or the magician? You know that place where you're not conscious and you're not sleeping either? That's your power bill to the electric company. Right here. I want us to be here with free energy, where the Wardenclyffe Tower meets the Eiffel Tower. But that's not where we are. We are here, where you've got the utility and you've got residential solar. Between these two, we know which one saves you money. This is where we can go in the meantime. But this is where I want us to be now, and this can be done now. So let me deputize you to represent DOSE, Department of Solar Efficiency, and let's get on the podcast and get the message out today. See you soon.
I think probably they all advertise themselves equally. At least they'd better, because the
Mm.
only way you're going to get noticed in the world is if you're able to promote yourself. And in fact, I'll go beyond that. Anybody who's selling anything, and of course, a comic or a comedian is selling their performance, but anybody who's selling anything is self-promoting in a way. So working in psychiatry, I had drug reps come to me all the time in order to try and get me to write prescriptions of their medication. But it wasn't the medication that they would sell, it was themselves, because by forming a relationship and getting that going, that's where the sales occur. So the comedian has to get that relationship with the audience. Comic can maybe get away with just telling jokes without getting the relationship as strong, but he still has to promote outside of the show itself.
That's all right. So Matthew, what don't you want me to know about you?
I'm an open book. I tell everything about myself.
Okay. All right. That's
So
an interesting.
go ahead. I'll challenge you. Try and find something I won't talk about.
Try and find something you won't talk about. Well, I don't want to talk about those things either. So,
Right, right.
all right. So we'll try. So, okay. What would be what can you say badly about Hitler?
Just about anything. The man was short.
There
He
you
had a
go.
stupid he had a stupid looking mustache.
Yeah, I think there you go. That's exactly the way to. And then the third thing was he was wearing high heels the whole time. We didn't know that, but who knows?
Yeah, but, well, lifts at least, yeah.
Yeah, yes,
He
got the lift.
also
So
he also fist punched an awful lot, and you'd think he could come up with some different hand motions.
yeah, he probably was the originator of the fist bump. It just got taken out of context, right?
Right, right.
So censorship and offense. So does a comic avoid offense while a comedian courts it to prove a point, like a magician?
Um, Sometimes offense can be funny, but some ways offense has to be avoided. So in a show that I did way back in 1996 called Ubu Ra, the entire thing, of course, is making fun of a man who wants to be king, but he's gross and obese and a slob, um, and there's lots of things that you can take offense at in that. In fact, when it was originally performed in Paris, supposedly after the first word, merdre, the audience rioted for 15 minutes before they could get it under control and get back to performing it. When we did the show and we were taking it to New York, uh, we were brought by the Henson Foundation, and they simply said, these characters cannot be speaking in this voice because it was considered um, pickaninny, and that was something that was just too offensive to too many people. And I agree with that. And I didn't like
So
what
when
they
you say
did.
speak in the voice, are you talking about the words or an accent?
The accent, um,
Okay.
and then the characterization of the puppets themselves were somewhat. I mean, they weren't put in blackface or anything like that, but they
On a
were.
puppet?
It's,
So then what
fair enough.
was it? All right.
That
So
was just
then,
just
uh-huh.
yeah, just the style that they were done in.
The porcelain was rotting. So who survived better in a cancel culture environment? The comic, the comedian, the magician, or the mudslinger?
Um, well, I think cancel culture is taken way too far as far as the terms itself. If you want cancel culture, you have to go back to McCarthyism, in which case then very few people survived that were accused of being communists. Um, the cancel culture of today, I think, is just a means of trying to say, look, let's just be a little bit nicer to each other. And yeah, it has changed some routines, but that doesn't mean that the routines have gotten worse. In fact, they might have gotten better because they've had to be careful about not saying the wrong thing and offending
Hmm.
somebody.
So self-censorship can increase the quality of a performance?
I think it can, when you are censoring yourself for the right reasons. Yeah. Again, if I go back to Michael from I can't think of Michael's last name, but he's Kramer on Seinfeld.
Hmm.
When he started using the N word on stage, um, he could have used to censor himself there.
Right, right. Yeah, that's an extreme. I don't know. Yeah, it wasn't
It's
like he was not censoring himself anymore, right? He like removed the censor. Maybe that's how it would happen, right? He just like
yeah,
censor filter gone.
right, right.
Yeah, that's possibly a good kind of like how AI hallucinates and wants to turn into, a murderous god, basically. So, yeah, maybe
Yeah,
that's the way it works. So, timing and delivery, is it a science or an art?
both. You've got to have the art of being able to know the right time to do it, emotionally, and as you experience the interaction with the audience. But there's also that science behind it that allows you to kind of figure out how to work it, so to speak. It's like the rules of three. You tell the same joke three times, and the third time is funny, but the first two, it's not necessarily.
The same joke, or you mean list of three?
Well, it's a matter of it's a response actually. In theater, they'll do it where the script reverts to the same line three times in a row, and the biggest laugh is always on the third time for that line, expected at least.
Got it. So
If you
like a
keep,
refrain or a callback in
yeah,
comedy?
yeah,
Okay. Got it. So a tag, really? Is
Yeah.
that maybe?
And with the list of three, of course, the list of three sometimes can be, I mean, if it's not done in the right order, like talking about Hitler in high heels, maybe wasn't the right one to have as the third one. Maybe his stupid mustache was, you know?
Well, it's supposed to be like the most extreme, the third one, right? So
Yeah,
yeah, it's, sometimes the list of three, you need to think about it before just spouting
right,
out. I'd say he was wearing a wig the whole time, but
right.
so even that's not even close. So, okay. So comedy as commentary. So when does a comedian cross into being a philosopher or a preacher?
When they're on late night television.
Okay. Yeah.
Um,
They have an agenda.
yeah, no, when I think that when you're doing topical humor, using the newspaper or things of that sort in order to be able to come up with your jokes, um, listen news stories, things of that sort, then you're doing commentary and philosophizing. When you're just telling stories about events that happened in your life or in a friend of yours life or something of that sort, there's not a lot of commentary there, not a lot of philosophical. So Stephen Wright, when he talks about that, he called the operator and said, I can't find my socks, and she said they're behind the couch. um, that's a no social commentary. But we all know Jimmy Kimmel, Stephen Colbert have done quite a bit of commentary and philosophizing on their shows.
So then is truth treasure in heaven?
Um, I think truth is yeah, I think so. I think that's a good way to define it.
Not everybody's going for the riches for the next iteration, right? That's the
Right, right.
that's what we're witnessing. All right, so Matthew, are you ready to enter the multiverse?
Sure.
All right, so board game Zoomcast, play versus performance. So you have to choose an avatar. So if comedy were a board game Zoomcast, are you competing as the colorist avatar, adding tone, mood, and shading, or the Foley artist avatar, building punchlines with soundscapes and timing?
Let me hear you ask that question again.
Well, let me put it in this context. So does comedy work better when it's painted vividly or when it's orchestrated sonically?
Um, I think that there's a time and a place for both. Sometimes you have to paint it vividly, but sometimes you can go at it surreptitiously.
So the multiverse doesn't have it's infinite time, so it's not linear time. So what
Right.
time would it be right in the multiverse?
Well, that's the nice thing about multiverse. It can be at different times all along the way, right?
That's another option.
Yeah.
All right.
Especially, yeah, especially if the multiverse includes um, everything the same up to a fracture point or something of that sort in a timeline. You know.
That's hey, I'm still working on that one too. We're gonna figure out how the multiverse actually works. So here on the Comedians and Elevators podcast, we have a tradition where the previous guest asks a question for the next guest. And the
Okay.
previous guest was Justin Strake. And his
Okay.
question for you, Matthew, is what is your favorite comic or comedian and why did they have an influence on you?
Well, my favorite would have to be Robin Williams. Absolutely. The man was, I think, a comic genius. The fact that he could go in and out of different characters within seconds, do different voices in the process, and that he was able to respond to anything in his audience so quickly and be able to run with it and do a spiel based on that. Um, all improv, I think, is just the most amazing thing at all. So he would have to be my all-time favorite, I think.
All right. So, last question, Matthew. Legacy. Who gets remembered? Will the comic's tight five survive time, or will the comedian's cultural point of view be more timeless?
Um, Depends on whether or not they get their own sitcom.
That's for sure.
Um, yeah, I mean, I think okay, so Jerry Seinfeld or Larry David. Um, they'll be remembered for their style that they performed in.
Hmm.
And so in that respect, they'll go down. And Larry David may be remembered long after Jerry Seinfeld, because I mean, Jerry Seinfeld was just a reflection of Larry David in some respects there, as
Wow.
far as the sitcom went. Larry David was the genius behind that, I think. Um, but
Yeah, he was the writer. He was one of the
yeah,
writers.
yeah,
Yeah, but you got to perform it. Yeah, his performance. They're very. You're right. They're very close. But of course, most people don't really know that. So Jerry
right.
Seinfeld. That's a good comparison. Well,
But Jerry Seinfeld's, I mean, his humor. I love his humor. I love his like, why is it that they always complain about the noise an airplane makes? I mean, he always talks in that same whiny kind of tone.
yeah. Yeah,
And
they both share that. They both, yeah, that's a good, they had a good thing going to say the least.
yes.
So Matthew, where can everybody find you online?
Well, I'm a little difficult. My web page is in construction right now, but it will be at mplvoiceovers.com. And so that's the place to go. I can be found on Facebook. I can be found on Instagram. You can find me on both of those under MPL voiceovers or under Matthew Lindquist. I have pages for both. And then I'm on LinkedIn. Um, and then I use sites like voices.com, Bodalgo, which are places they can go if they want to hire through one of those kinds of sites. That can find me there too. So
All
those are
right.
the places so far, and hopefully it'll continue to expand. And when I get representation, that'll make a real difference too.
Absolutely. All in matter of time. So,
Right,
well, Matthew, thank you so much for being my guest. And for everyone, please like and subscribe. And we'll see you in the next one.
great.
If you're interested in too much information like in the network state or Mantipus the chicken shit, check out this video. Or is it this one right here? Well, either way. Lizard